All right, well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating and joining us this evening, afternoon, morning, wherever it is where you're located. We really, really appreciate it, and we're so excited to have some awesome alums here kind of sharing their insight with you today. Hopefully give you a little bit of a perspective around the MBA process, specifically Stern, and this will be a pretty informal discussion. To kick it off again, I am asking if you could just keep yourselves on mute and maybe turn your webcams off just for the panel portion of this, just so everyone can clearly see our three panelists. That would be super helpful. I'll let you know when we move into Q&A, when you can like turn on your audio and rejoin via video. But yeah, thanks again. So my name is Erica Hartsfield. I've been with Stern for 3 years now in the admissions side of things. And I work very closely with a lot of our current student clubs and our affinity groups at Stern. And I'm currently located in Jersey City, across the river. That's my secret in the office. I actually don't live in New York. But enjoying myself here across the river. I hope all of you are well and your loved ones are well. And yeah, without further ado, I'm going to let our alums introduce themselves. And how this is going to go is we'll do 40 minutes or so of a panel. I'll kind of ask some questions to our panelists, and then I'll leave the rest of the time open to Q&A. So feel free to chat your questions into the chat box. And my colleague Mary is on the back end. She'll be kind of, facilitating those towards the end of this hour. Cool. So why don't we start with Janelle?
Sure. Is there anything in particular you would like us to share?
Yeah. Why don't you share? Let's see where you're from, what you were doing before Stern, and maybe why you decided to pursue an MBA.
Okay, that's good. Hello, everyone. My name is Janelle. I am originally from Panama, but I moved to New York when I was like 12, so, also a New Yorker. Before pursuing an MBA, I was working in PR. So I was a publicist, so still doing brand work. And I decided to get an MBA for a couple of reasons. I just definitely wanted to switch careers, and I saw that a lot of brand managers, which is what I wanted to do, had MBAs. So I did my research and decided I should get one too.
Thank you. Candace?
Yeah, hopefully you guys can hear me okay. So I'm Candace. And just before I start, at work, it's tough, right? Like there's a lot going on in the world, and don't want to make this super heavy, but also just want to acknowledge that you guys are thinking about school and kind of getting into a place and going back and forth between work, and we have this panel, and it's kind of like there's a lot going on. So I hope everyone's keeping well. I hope you guys are doing well and your families are good and all that good stuff. But I'm Candace, and I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee. And I decided, it's just my name and then why I decided to do an MBA, right?
Yeah, what were you doing before?
What was I doing before? Yeah, I knew it was missing. I knew there was 3 things. Okay. I was working in market research in financial services for a really small company before I got my MBA. And I decided to get an MBA. My story is a little bit maybe different from some folks. I had worked for 7 years before I went to get to grad school, and kind of, to be quite honest, around year 5, realized very quickly that I was running up against, my natural talent in terms of, how to lead people, how to continue to grow professionally, and didn't want to kind of risk it and get to the actual end of my natural talent. And so I decided to go to business school and learn from folks who knew more about management and leading teams in some of the areas that I was interested in. So that is my journey.
Thank you, Candace. Lamar?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Lamar Shand. I'm originally from Brooklyn. That's currently also where I live. And so why I decided to pursue an MBA. So originally I majored in engineering. So I majored in civil engineering. And then prior to my MBA, I was working at a company called Westinghouse Electric Company. So they made nuclear power plants. And I realized like probably like into year two that I was just like very bored. And I probably, not that I picked the wrong major, but maybe I picked the wrong company. And I kind of didn't really see a way out of how to like transition or even what else was out there. So I think one, I talked to a few people who had done the consortium program about like how it's helped them, how they thought about the process. And I also weighed other like avenues as well, like law school or like public policy and all these different things. And I wanted to get an MBA because I felt it was more well-rounded. So ultimately, that's what I pursued, and I thought it was a good career move because it allowed me to really rebrand myself and not just be like an engineer focused heavily on quant. So really pursued an MBA as like an avenue to really explore and also like expand my capabilities and job trajectory as well.
Great, thank you. So yeah, we'll jump right into it. You already answered the why MBA question. But you know, if you can maybe think back to when you were an applicant, if you know, thinking about a lot of the people who are joining the call today are obviously interested or, you know, very interested or somewhat thinking about, you know, whether an MBA is right for them and in the midst of preparing their applications. And so how did you go about preparing for business school? And, you know, particularly like what did you do during the application process, the discovery process? If you could shed a little bit of insight on that. And I'll leave it up to anyone to start this portion.
I had a bit of like a not traditional way, so I feel like someone else should start.
Candace, I'll start if you don't want to start. Okay. So because I was at a job that I wasn't really, I guess, fulfilled in, I had a lot of free time. So I think that was one way that it was a lot more beneficial. So I was like preparing essays, reading a lot of research, like why was an MBA beneficial for someone who wants to like switch their career. So I did a lot of research online. As I mentioned before, at the time I was living in Pittsburgh. And so I had a network of people who went to Carnegie Mellon who did the consortium program. So I hung out with them a lot and spoke to them about like, how has this MBA, because I really didn't know anything about like what an MBA was at the point. I was just like, let me get my bachelor's and get a job. And so as I started to see like, oh, all these different capabilities and different sort of like avenues that they had, then I started to research the programs that they went across, which was primarily the consortium, and just read about like all the alumni and what they went on to do. And then of course got all like the study materials for like GMAT. So I would go to work and then after work, go to the library and just essentially just study all night for the GMAT. And just practicing like writing my essays. So very methodical about how I approached it. So yeah, it was like talking to people and just doing research on my own as well.
I'll jump in next. So I had a little bit of a different process. I knew that I did not want, so when I applied, I actually did a dual degree. I did an MPA as well as an MBA. And so I knew that I wanted to be in the same city for both programs. And so because you switch between schools. And so location was like a big deal. I spent a lot of time talking to people. I know that people have like, there's like it's like forums and like, if you're applying to different MBA programs, you can join these like online forums. I actually stayed away from those because I found like it would be very overwhelming. I thought like some people were weird and like it was like this is not gonna be my set. It's just gonna be confusing. And so instead of that, I did the same thing as Lamar. I talked to just people. I found people in my network through undergrad asked friends of mine to connect me to folks. I spent a lot of time looking at the types of jobs that I wanted to have, that I thought I wanted to have, and saw where some of those people went to business school as just like a clue into the, you know, the ways the different business schools might specialize. I am like very not self-motivated, so I could not study up for the GMAT on my own. I like barely studied when I paid for a class at the rate that I should have. So I signed up for Manhattan GMAT. It was an investment, but for me, a worthwhile investment. And then I don't know if this is a question you're going to ask Erica, but something I did not do, which I really encourage folks to do, is like start to put on paper why you want to get an MBA. I don't know. I was a writer. My undergrad was at Princeton. Like all I could do was really read and write. By the time I graduated, I was not an engineer. And so I, you know, think I underestimated how long it was going to take me to really get onto paper why I wanted an MBA and what about me made me a compelling candidate. And so I spent less time on that when I was like preparing for business school, and really regretted it, because that was where I put in, I think, a lot of late nights at the end, is trying to get that all together. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of my journey. The one thing I will also say, sorry, I just was acting like I was wrapping up, but I have one more thing. I tried to talk to as many alums as I could, like folks who actually went to school, so I was interested in, just to kind of see the kind of people they were, you know, like if they're the kind of folks that I felt like I could really like vibe with. And so that is something else I would recommend. Okay, now I'm done.
Cool. So I think for me, I don't know if anyone, if you have any friends who are publicists or work in PR, but you get paid nothing, basically. And also, like, my parents, I mean, I'm an immigrant, so obviously they're immigrants as well. They did not understand why I was trying to quit my job to go to school. They were like, you can obviously do both at the same time. And so wasn't really looking at them for help. So basically I was broke, and that really defined my preparation for applying to business schools. So I think very early on, I knew that I wouldn't be able to afford to apply to a large number of schools. So I had kind of very quickly narrowed it down to like 4 places. I think that really helped me in particular, just because I was able to better manage like trying to make connections and trying to talk to alum, and not necessarily feeling overwhelmed with the whole process. Again, I was broke, so for the GMAT, I took GMAT books out of the library and mostly just would wake up early, like do a practice exam before work, go to work, come back, go through all the questions. So definitely made time for that, like stopped talking to people altogether and just studied for the GMAT and worked. And then I think another thing that was helpful for me, I sort of assembled like a mini team. So I had like my friend who was an English major in undergrad, someone who had already gotten their MBA, just a small team of people that I really trusted to kind of counsel me on the process, like whenever I had issues, and to like read over my essays. And like literally at one point I realized, okay, probably can't afford to apply to 5 schools, need to cut one. I like assembled my team, was like, we need a meeting, I need to cut a school, what school am I cutting? So I think having kind of like that support group was also really helpful for me personally. But yeah, and then I just spent a lot of time once I had like my 4 schools, just connecting with people and alum at the schools to see, you know, what the vibe was.
And it's always important to check out what the vibe is at the schools you're applying to. So yeah, I appreciate all of that insight. I think, you know, from an admissions perspective, definitely like speaking to people and just setting up time and reaching out to people. I always say our alums are great, our current students are great, and they're more than willing to like chat with you if you reach out. And definitely, if, you know, having that that support system of people who can keep you motivated, you know, and knowing what your strengths are, and maybe those times where you need to make sure that you're refocusing on like the goal at hand is super important. So thank you so much for sharing that. And Janelle, so you said you were narrowed it down to 4 schools. You had to cut one. I won't ask you what those schools are. However, I am going to ask the why Stern question.
I could tell you why the 4 schools. It's no big deal.
So I guess I'd rather know why you decided to come to Stern. So maybe we'll start with you, Janelle. Why did you ultimately choose Stern?
Yeah, no, I think actually it's probably important for me to share what schools I was looking at in order to answer this question. So at the time, and like, you know, you have a plan when you're applying for business school, and then, you know, things go awry once you're inside and actually doing it. But at the time, I thought that I was going to pursue a career post MBA that would require me to really like network a lot, like something non-traditional. As you can see, I am in brand management, which is like a pretty traditional MBA track. But so a lot of what was driving my my decision on schools was proximity to New York. I felt like I needed to be where the companies were so that I could make connections with people. I mean, it actually does make a huge difference. It ended up helping me a lot regardless. And so I was really only looking at schools where I could get to New York pretty quickly. So naturally, NYU, Columbia, Yale, and Georgetown. Those were my 4 schools. 3 of them are consortium. Columbia isn't. I think all through the application process, I was convinced basically that I was going to go to Columbia. I live right by the bridge, so I was like, this is going to be great because I'm going to roll out of bed and school is going to be like 2 train stations away and life is going to be set. So once I got into schools, I started, you know, there's a lot of events. I would absolutely like prioritize all of the kind of events that allow you to like be on campus and talk to students and really interact with people. And I basically, you know, I like my teams. So I had a friend come with me to like all of the events. And Columbia and NYU happened to have all the events the same weekend. I don't know if they planned that on purpose for like people who need to travel to New York, but all the events were the same weekend. So I was literally like going uptown, downtown, back and forth all weekend. And it just turned out that like the people at NYU just felt more, they felt more connected to my like personal vibes. And I like last minute was like, you know what, like at the end of the day, one of the most important things you get out of your business school experience is the network. And I want a network of people that I want to be around, that I'm going to want to keep in contact with. And so, you know, ended up coming to Stern instead. But yeah, like literally, if you had asked me at any point during the process, I would have been like, yep, I'm going to Columbia. But honestly, the people really changed my mind.
Thank you. Lamar, do you want to answer this question?
Yeah. So some of the schools, so I only applied to consortium schools. It was just, the process was a lot easier. So some of the schools that I was looking at, one was in Ithaca, and it was like, I wanted to be in New York, so it was just very far. So that was like kind of like out. And then the other school I was looking in was almost 50% of the MBA class were engineers. So I was like, okay, I don't really want to go down that route and just brand myself as like an engineer with an MBA. And so the ultimate reason why I chose Stern was because of just the diversity of, sorry, I think there's music, the diversity of the paths that you could do in essentially one location, like whether that's consulting, marketing, technology. And at that point, I was interested in marketing, although my essay was about nonprofit consulting. At that point, I wasn't sure. So I was just still grappling with what I wanted to do post MBA. And so just being able to, one, be at a school that you could really explore different career paths at the same time. The other thing was just being able to move back home and, you know, save some money on rent, living in Brooklyn. So even though it was a little bit further out, I think that also like propelled me to go to Stern. And then to Janelle's point, like meeting the people and the alumni, it just felt like home, like it just clicked, like the people were very open, there was warmth, they had good energy. And I think all of those three things combined like made me want to choose Stern ultimately.
Thank you. Candace, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, they've covered it. My answer's in between those two, for sure.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks for sharing. And so, you know, thinking about, you decide to come to Stern, you're at Stern, think back, maybe it's, you know, the people that you met, maybe it's the classes you were taking. How were you able to find a sense of community while you were a student at Stern? Pop it off to anyone. Maybe Candace, if you want to start with this one.
Yeah, sure, I'll start. So that's a really good question, because I think it's funny, you've got like people who are either from New York or lived in New York, and I have been in New York for 7 years before Stern. And so really came in thinking I was not gonna make new friends. You know, I was like, I've already got my church, I've already got like my community, my neighbors. I'm like that person in the neighborhood who talks to everybody. And so I was like, I'm not gonna really meet new people. And the two kind of most influential groups is first consortium. There is kind of nothing like being able to walk into school with like 40 people who you know fairly well because of OP or just because you've kind of seen them around. And I think Stern's commitment year over year to consortium was huge, right? Because you have like your consortium class, and you also have the other consortium class, and kind of, you know people who kind of know people as well, which is awesome. So that was the first thing. Secondly, I got involved in student clubs, which is such a throwback to undergrad, because I was in like student government in undergrad too. And so I was on the board for AHBBS, which is the Black and Hispanic MBA Students Association. And that was huge for me, not only because I got connected to, you know, the people within AHBBS, but also because there were so many opportunities to collaborate with other student organizations that I may or may not have been personally involved with. So if we, you know, did an event with the Women in Business Club, then that gives me an opportunity to kind of meet people there. And so that was huge. I think what I will say is, and I lived in Crown Heights, and I will never leave because I have the world's most perfect apartment. And so I think as long as you choose to be intentional, you can really live wherever you want, and you can have an amazing experience. I know people who, you know, did their MBA on more of like a, it feels maybe more like a campus than being in New York City. So I don't know where folks are coming from, but I think there can be the perception that you're not able to really build community. But like, y'all, we had a group meeting that was set up the week before or the week of our orientation, our OP for consortium. And like, I still text these people on this group chat still, right? So it's like been, I don't even know how many, like, yeah, 5 years, 4 years, whatever. So you can certainly build community if you choose to.
Thank you. Anyone else? Janelle?
Yeah, no, I think Candace said, you know, the word kind of that I was thinking about, and it's like, you have to be intentional. I think it's up to you. I think it's always funny when I hear this question, because people are always like very worried about like, oh my God, like you're not going to make friends. It's New York City. And it's like, for someone who had basically grown up in the city, all of my friends were here. I went to Penn undergrad, so all of them moved to New York City after graduation. So I had a very large network of friends in New York that I just did not see for 2 years while I was at Stern. You know, I just had made the decision that, you know, I was going to give my all to this experience, and I was so involved with you know, different things at school. There's so many things you can learn and so many things that you can be a part of, that I honestly had to be more intentional about like making sure I saw my best friend than making friends at school, because I just basically lived at school. And I think actually New York City as your campus is an amazing opportunity. Like the things that you can do and the fun that you can have when New York City is your campus is, you know, something that you wouldn't get if you were in the middle of nowhere. And so there's a lot of opportunities for you and your friends to like do unique things. People were putting me onto things that I didn't even know about, having lived in the city for years. Go for drinks in between classes because the bar's across the street. Like, I mean, it's a great time. And I think if that's the kind of thing that you want to get out of the experience, you will. Like, no questions asked.
Thank you. Yeah, we actually have quite a few events every year that we invite a bunch of our alums to. And I remember it was like our interview day, maybe 2 years ago or so. And we actually had a hard time getting alums from the class of 2015. And they're known, like they show up to everything. In that particular year, like none of them showed up to this event. And we found out later it was because one of them was getting married. And so all of them were going to that wedding. And so definitely just highlighting some of the points that you all made. And so I guess moving on and, you know, thinking about, you know, what you've been doing since Stern, how have you been able to leverage the Stern network or community since graduating and kind of in your professional careers? That's question one. And question two is, are there any skills that you learned at Stern that maybe you were surprised that, you know, maybe came up in your professional careers?
I can take this. So how I've leveraged the network. So when I graduated, you know, I interned in brand management. Ultimately, I didn't get like the career or the job I wanted right after Stern. So I went to Macy's. I was like in this buying and planning sort of rotation program. And then at the laid off, so I was like, oh, damn, I got my MBA, now I'm laid off, I don't have a job. And so I leveraged the Stern network to understand like what roles were out there, also talk to alumni and even classmates, just to coaching about like the process, like almost walk me through like what are the steps that I could take and how do I sort of like bring myself back up to get back on my feet and you know, pursue the career that I wanted to do. So thankfully, I was able to get a role in brand management after this being laid off. And then at that point, I was still not really fulfilled in that position. And I leveraged the Stern network again to get the next position I got at L'Oreal in brand management. And then even transitioning to Google, I also talked to more alumni and they coached me through the interview process. They talked about what the role would be like. So at that point, I was always touching into the Stern network to help me really transverse and go along with my career. So I think it just speaks to like the power and also the willingness of like the network to really reach out and help one another as well. And in terms of what I learned at Stern, I think they talk about the STAR method in terms of interviewing, like that framework. I'm still using it, whether it's you know, at work or interviewing. So that's something I really that stuck with me as well.
Yeah, I can go because I have a pretty legit example. So I had done my MBA internship, and most people go to do their MBA internship, come back with an offer. I happen to hate my MBA internship, so came back, second year, probably like one of very few people who did not have a job lined up for graduation. Wasn't stressed out though. Everyone else was stressed out for me. I wasn't really stressed out. I waited till the spring, and I had career services. They are very invested in you, so I had career services kind of emailing me like, "Hello, would you like to start interviewing for places? Like, you're gonna graduate soon." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm still thinking about like where and what I want to do and where I want to go." Long story short, I had identified that I wanted to go to Unilever post-graduation. And so I reached out to career services. I was like, I decided that I'm going to Unilever after graduation. And they were like, okay, I mean, like, you should be more open, but we can connect you to an alum. So they connected me to an alum. I emailed her. I'm like, hey, really interested in working at Unilever. And she's like, oh, turns out I'm leaving my role. Send me your resume. And then I got her role, and it was that easy. I was like, this is amazing. Like, as soon as I made the call, she went out of her way to really help me, and I started like 2 weeks later. And then in terms of things I've learned, I think negotiation, they have those classes, highly recommend them. I think that's something that I didn't really do before business school, and have literally like kept the books or the printouts really from that class, and have been able to kind of use and practice those skills post-graduation. So I think that's a big one for me.
That's a popular one. A lot of our alums refer to the negotiations class. So
love that class. Take that class.
Candace, anything to add?
Yeah, I guess, so mine's maybe a little bit different. So I interviewed an intern at Accenture before my last year and really enjoyed it. And so I've been there since, so don't have a story about switching, but because Stern has really great relationships with employers, with different companies, it is not, I think, uncommon for particularly a firm like Accenture for there to be actually a pretty deep Stern network within the company. And so I've been able to leverage internally for specific roles or projects where maybe I didn't have the requisite level of expertise coming in the door, and have been able to reach out to people to even do like silly things like, hey, this is where I'm thinking of going on this project. Can you just spend 15 minutes with me and give me a sanity check? Something that I don't necessarily might not feel comfortable going to my boss to ask in case it's a bad sanity check from my perspective, but that's been super helpful. And I also took investment banking and corporate finance, and had to build a business case for one of the projects for a potential project that we were looking to sell, and leaned really heavily on that. And I kind of just took that class because, I thought could be, interesting for me to know how to do, could be helpful, took those classes. And so that was kind of a big surprise for me in a good way.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that insight. And so maybe thinking about some roles that you may have had since Stern, even before Stern, a lot of the people on this call may be currently in roles or industries, or thinking about moving into roles or industries where, the majority of the people in that space may not look like them. They may not come from a similar background to them. And so what's maybe your advice or your perspective on that? How have you been able to navigate those types of situations? It's a deep one.
Wow, deep question. So let's see. I don't really have an answer, so I'm just gonna rant for a couple of minutes. I think one of the great things about Stern in particular is its diversity. I think New York City attracts a wide range of people. Not to say that the school can't do better, right? I think even when I was in school, you know, we always tried to push the school to do better in terms of their diversity numbers. I think on the upside, historically, I hope it's still the same, but historically, Stern has always had one of the larger consortium classes, which speaks to their commitment to making sure that the class does have a variety of perspectives. And so I think something that helped me a lot through my MBA experience was I think I kind of found like how to kind of bring my full self to corporate situations through business school. I had been, most of my experiences, my high school, my undergrad were in like primarily white institutions. And I think I probably did a lot more like code switching then, whereas I feel like at Stern, I made a very conscious effort to like just really be myself, and I've been able to take that with me. And I think Stern also gave me the opportunity to really like find my voice in terms of like demanding from, you know, people higher up that they do things about diversity. And I'm sure Unilever is tired of hearing all of my demands and requests. But like, for example, someone in the class behind me started, you know, a like diversity and inclusion like day for the business school students. So then my year, we took it a step further and we made it mandatory for all first years. So I think the one thing that's very different about business school versus like your undergraduate experience is that your relationship with like the staff and the faculty is a lot closer, and you really shape the kind of environment around you. So I think at least Stern does a good job, or, you know, when I was there, to really listen to the voices of the students. And with that, I think whatever you're personally passionate about or worried about, even if it doesn't exist, you can make that change yourself. So that was my attempt at that question.
No, I think it's good. I think because I think there is something really. So here's what I'll say. I think for a lot of folks who are on this call, being in a company where there might not be a lot of people who look like you will not be an unfamiliar experience, right? Probably have it now. Probably will continue to have it. And so the way that I'm gonna, you know, try to answer this, Erica, is to talk about how my relationships at Stern and the relationships I've built have empowered me to go into those, kind of what Janelle was talking about, empowered me to go into those instances and those situations at my workplace with more information and more confidence. And so one thing that my friends and I from business school decided to do, they're all consortium friends, is we went and met for drinks. I think this is maybe, I don't know, obviously not recently, but it was probably a year and a half ago. And we talked about our salaries, and we talked about our bonuses, and we gave numbers. And you know, when it's time for a negotiation for salary, I took negotiations. I didn't use that example because I'm terrible still. I'm growing. It's my growth mindset. I'm still improving in negotiations. And so I have a very good friend who could, I mean, I don't know, like she's basically going to be president of that company one day based on how she negotiates. Like she's going to negotiate her way into a CEO position. But so I talked to her really frankly, hey, this is the number that I'm at, you know, how do I manage this? And I think there's power in being able to develop these relationships in a meaningful way. I think Stern attracts people who are interested in not just having kind of surface level fly by night relationships with classmates. And so to be able to say, hey, this is like personal information, but also I need your help. How can, like, now I know. So now if I go and I get a number, you know, from a bonus or something, I can say that's actually not where the market is based on this outside information I have. And so then I have that kind of information. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I can quickly add. So similar to what Candace said, I think one, like going to Stern, it gave me the confidence to realize that I belong in this space, because oftentimes when you go into these heavily white spaces, you may feel like an imposter, and you may think that you don't belong, that you don't have the capabilities to do as good a job or better as your white counterparts. So just being grounded in the fact that, hey, you graduated from this school, you toughed it out for 2 years, you can accomplish this, is things that I needed to instill in myself. And then secondly, that network that Candace also alluded to, like sometimes a sounding board, because you may not have people of color at your job to talk to these things about. So again, that network came into play to really bounce ideas off, like also get a sanity check, like, are you experiencing this? Am I the only one? So those things also, between a network and just having that confidence, really grounded me to be able to advocate for myself and be able to also excel in these spaces where you may be the only person of color.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That insight is really invaluable. I appreciate you all kind of shedding these different perspectives on these things, because these are important, you know, questions that our prospective students, I'm sure, if not, they haven't already been kind of, you know, encountering or thinking about these things. I'm sure they certainly will moving forward in their careers. So I appreciate all of that insight. We'll last couple of questions, and then we actually have a bunch of really good questions coming through the chat, so we'll get to those. I apologize for the lighting where I'm at. I'm like slowly turning into a shadow as the sun is setting here, but I'm still here. So last couple of questions, we'll end on a lighter note here. So what is your favorite Stern memory? Stern memory or favorite class or whatever? What was your favorite memory at Stern?
Oh my gosh, that's such a hard, I was like, that's such a hard question that I thought of mine. So this, so right when, it's probably not gonna be making this much lighter, so Janelle and Lamar will have to come back behind me and line it up again. The second year of business school was coincided in New York at the time when Eric Garner's, the cops who killed him were found not guilty in New York. And so it was a really interesting time for me because I, you know, got an MPA as well. So at Wagner, like you couldn't like swing a stick without hitting somebody who was talking about like that topic, because we're all policy students. Like this is kind of like our jam. And it was weird because no one was talking about it at Stern. It was bizarre. And so a really good friend of mine, Jennifer Meacham, was, you know, very adamant that that was something that, as like, it's not, this is not a business discussion. It's not, because, you know, businesses are in America, it's an American issue. And so she organized with a couple other people a version of like a TED Talk, and we brought, and so it was me and two other folks spoke, as well as a professor, Dolly Chugg, and the dean of the school at the time, Dean Peter Henry, came, and we had a really good, I think, conversation around racism and justice and what that means for us as business leaders and what that looks like. And it was very like multiracial in that room, and not just even it's diverse in the sense that folks who are, you know, international students who are very new to these topics were involved in the discussion. And I was so proud of Stern. I thought it was something, and so proud of Jen personally, but like this is kind of not something that typically had happened, and that's it's by far my favorite memory.
Okay, I'll keep it light. I have you know, not to be like corny, but there are literally too many memories to count. But you know, narrowing it down to like things that are appropriate and, you know, things that I think you guys could take advantage of. I would say one of the ones that really stuck with me was I had done a Stern Signature project. And the one that I did was working with the Clinton Foundation and Haitian entrepreneurs. And so we got the chance to basically work with a Haitian entrepreneur who had won some kind of contest, basically, to help her figure out how to scale her business. And so we, you know, had a lot of meetings with her. We actually got to go to Haiti for a weekend to like visit her company, and she was making soap, and so we got to like make soap with her. Quick weekend in Haiti, like things that, you know, people in business school do. And a couple of weeks later, when we presented like the final work plan for her, they had actually flown her to New York, and literally she was just like in tears of just like gratitude that like we, you know, had taken the time to, you know, help her grow her business. So that was like a really impactful moment in my business school experience.
My most memorable is more around travel. So my second semester, so I studied abroad in Barcelona, and it was really fun because there were about 5 or 6 other people in AHBBS in the consortium, and we were all at the same school. And then there were some other people who were studying abroad at London Business School. So we traveled Europe together for like the last semester. Yeah, and I think it was like I didn't study abroad in undergrad, so I wanted to use this as a time to like recreate those memories. So I think that was probably like the best my moment in Stern.
Thanks for sharing. And final question, maybe in like a sentence or two. What is any lasting advice that you would give to this group who is currently planning on applying?
I got an easy one. And I think Candace actually mentioned it early on in our conversation, but it's like literally write down why you're going to business school. I think it's so easy to come into business school and forget, because there's so much happening. You get exposed to so many things that you forget, like, oh, I actually left this job even though I was making great money because I wanted work-life balance. And then you are like hit with an investment banking opportunity with a billion-dollar check. And then you end up going that route when like that you literally went to business school to get away from that, you know? So I think literally just write it down so that as you're going through the experience and you're met with all of these things, you remember like what the goal was. You're consortium or not, like you're paying for it. So make sure you get what you want out of it.
I'll be quick. I think also like have a plan B, you know. So definitely write down, be focused, but also yeah, like things change, and like some things are gonna not work out, and you're gonna be shocked, and some things are gonna work out, and you're gonna be shocked. So you know, be like thinking about like, what if everything goes south, like what's going to be my plan B? Because to Janelle's point, like it's 2 years, it goes by fast, and it is not going to be free. So be thoughtful and like make the most of your time.
Yeah, the one thing to add to Candace, I think when you're in business school, you may look over your shoulder and you see like your neighbors getting these internships, these offers, and you may not have it yet, but realize that your path is your path. And at the end of the day, it's going to work out for you because this is the path that you've chosen. So just being able to be steadfast in the fact that you've made the right decision, whatever it may be, and to really just live your truth within that mode. And I think just to keep that in the back of your mind as well.
Exactly. That's excellent advice. Write things down. I always tell people, like, write down a list of 10 things that you absolutely are not willing to compromise on when you're at business school. So, you know, when you're pulled in so many different directions and you're trying new things, you still have kind of that guiding light. So yeah, thank you for all of that advice. So we have a bunch of questions that are coming through the chat. So me and Mary are going to do our best to kind of facilitate them. But we have quite a few questions around career switching and the consortium in particular. And so I'll kind of, start by saying, if you're interested in learning more about the consortium, I'll share my contact information at the end of this presentation. So definitely reach out. And then we also every other Thursday are hosting like consortium chats and info sessions. So I'll be hosting one next Thursday as well. So, you can definitely get more information there. But questions around, career switching and how you were maybe able to do that through Stern, and how do you feel like the consortium, if at all, helped to facilitate that career switch?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely, it sounds intimidating, right? Because you're like, obviously I came from a communications background. I was a publicist, so I was just writing a lot and, doing events. And that's like, now I have to take accounting. What the fuck? But I think, a couple of things. One, I personally, one of the things that really did draw me to Stern was the way the core was kind of set up, and the fact that it was like, I hope it's still the same, a full semester, whereas like at a lot of other schools, they do it up front in like a month or two. And like for me, it was really important to have the time to like learn the basics. Like I wanted to come out and be able to, walk the walk. And so I won't lie, it's not easy. I spent a lot of time in the study room at Stern, especially that first semester when you're like literally learning all of the business basics. But you have your, they split you up into groups. So, in my group, we had someone who had actually like majored in accounting. So he would like tutor us on, he wasn't even taking the class, legit had tested out of the class, and he would just like tutor people on the side. And I think that's kind of, the things that you can expect from your classmates. And you can really lean into your group for like, what are those people's strengths, and use that to hopefully guide you and make it through the core. But I do think it's super helpful, obviously, to then be able to, switch careers and do something that's definitely more business focused and actually know like, oh, I know what depreciation is in a business case. So I think the way the core is set up at NYU is really helpful. And I think just leaning on your classmates and asking for help.
I just also want to give folks like a level of comfort, like it's what everyone does almost. Like everyone's going to switch, like, or not everyone. 90% of people are going to be here, go here, right? So you will not be alone, and Career Services is built to do this, to help you figure out how to craft your story, to tell the right level of detail, to adequately emphasize the parts of your background that are going to be transferable. And then also, you know, companies expect it too. So, you know, it's not their first rodeo seeing someone, you know, who was, you know, I was a major in international affairs and like want to go into consulting. Like they all get it. So hopefully that also puts some concern to rest. Like to Janelle's point, your classwork is set up to do it, but then like it's what people do. So you're good. You'll be fine. Go to Stern.
Yeah, the one thing I would add is what I did when I was like transitioning from engineering was just to take as many internships that I could outside of the summer internship. So because you're in New York, you can go to internship after your class and all these different things. So I tried to make sure I was getting as many or as much marketing experience with other internships just to like build up my resume to show that I have some experience to help me into marketing.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely. We actually got the Office of Career Development last year shared with us that over 30% of our students now are doing in-semester internships. So it's certainly becoming more and more popular as people look to go into a lot of different areas of business. Okay, so another question, how did you transition your mindset from full-time work to being a student?
It's rough. It's a rough transition. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I'm not gonna lie. I think luckily the application process sort of helps because you have to study for the GMAT. So it's like you know, at least it's not like you haven't studied something for a really long time. You know, that kind of like eases the transition. And honestly, a lot of the work in business school is group work, right? So I think having the group to be able to like divide and conquer, or you know, again, like lean in on the people who have different strengths, I think also really helps. But everyone's in the same boat, so you've got 200 students to vent about why did you become a student again. So you know, again, I think this is something that you kind of just like lean in with your classmates and, you know, enjoy the ride.
Yeah, I'm gonna say so. I don't want to be like overly positive, but honestly, like it's the last time you're gonna be able to invest in yourself this way. That's how I saw it. Like I transitioned, I was so ready. I was like, I'm gonna get to just like do, and it's not like undergrad, right? Besides the core, you don't have to be good at everything. So I was in accounting. I knew going in, I wasn't planning to having a career in accounting, never gonna be a CPA. So I took a quiz, and that quiz, my balance sheet didn't balance. I was like, oh well, like moved on. Like you know what I mean? Like that's not why I went to school. So I'm not gonna fail. You know, I want to know like the basics, but I knew I wanted to be able to say, I want to look at a cash flow statement. I want to look at all of these income statements. I need to understand if a company is in good health. That's what I took from accounting. So, and so I think you're able, you know, to kind of go into this with the right mind. If you can go into the mindset of, I'm investing in myself. I know what I need to get out of this class. And if I don't get an A, sky's not going to fall. So
Grade non-disclosure.
Correct. So I was fine. I mean, I loved being a student again. It was so nice to just, you know, it's 12 o'clock, you don't have class, you're just out here getting lunch, it's beautiful in the park. I don't know. And even if folks are doing this virtually, you know, it's just, I loved that time. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So I go on and on, obviously. I'll let Lamar talk because I'm just rambling.
I don't have much to add. I agree with what Candace and Janelle said. Everything was captured.
It's not like undergrad, just It's very different.
Yeah, definitely. So a couple of questions coming in, and I'm trying to kind of go in order here. We have quite a few, but just I can answer this one. So to what extent do students interact with NYU's other schools and grad programs? You might have more perspective as like former students. I know, Candace, you did the dual degree program, but the nice thing is that we do have dual degree programs, and our students can also take up to a quarter of their coursework at any of the other NYU-wide programs. So there's you know, decent amount of interaction with other NYU-wide programs. And then let's see. So what clubs and associations did you participate in? I know a lot of you were involved with AHBBS, the Association for Hispanic and Black Business Students, but were you a part of any other clubs?
I'll take this one. Yeah. So in addition to AHBBS, I was also in the Graduate Marketing Association, GMA. And I also was a part of the Follies. I'm not sure if they still have that, but yeah, Follies is like the improv show that they do for Stern. So I was on the committee for that. So that was another way just to meet another group of students as well.
Yeah, I was on student government, and then I was also on the board of what was then the Entertainment, Media, and Tech Association, but they've split those now. So I think there's like a separate tech group and a separate entertainment group. But back then, aging myself, you know, it was one association.
I don't remember my other clubs. I'm so sorry.
She was like, AHBBS.
Yeah, I was in AHBBS for sure. And then I was in some others, but I don't remember.
No worries, no worries. And this is a great question. So given that business school can be demanding with lots of activities and you always have to be on, how did you manage your mental health during business school and just staying sane?
That is a great question. Again, though, you know, it's not quite the same as undergrad. I think that first semester is tough. Obviously, it's like you're transitioning back to being a student, and there's a core, and there's like a lot of Stern-driven activities. You know, you might be recruiting at simultaneously, but honestly, after that, things get a lot more manageable. Especially if you do your internship and, you know, unlike me, you get an offer and kind of chill like the second year and don't have to deal with recruiting. But even with having to kind of recruit my second year, I think it's all pretty manageable. And honestly, you're driving like what kind of classes you want to take. So I was just taking things that either, you know, I wanted to brush up on or get better at, like negotiations, or things that I just thought was like fun. Again, there's great non-disclosure, so it's not like I was worried about whether, you know, I was going to get an A in this class. So I think there's less stress, and obviously just it's a lot more fun. You have a lot of fun with your classmates. And that's going to be like the appropriate version, but you guys can imagine, you know, there's a lot of fun that's to be had. So I think it's not as bad. Don't get worried about it. It's like a fun experience.
And what I'll also say, because conscious of the fact that like folks might not always be able to be in person, one of the things that I loved about Stern, and what I think Lamar and Janelle referred to as like finding your people, is that for Stern, having high EQ is really important. And so most of the students, all of the students who I really encountered, I never felt as though I was in actual competition with them, right? So when we were preparing for interviews I remember sitting with people and saying, hey, make sure that you brush up on these types of questions because this is what they're probably going to ask. You know, like that's not uncommon, and this is being recorded, so hopefully that's also not illegal. But they, you know, and that helped to balance, you know, keeping in mind what I want to do, but also not having to deal with the explicit pressure from someone else within my school who I'm afraid is going to like backbite me or not help me. There's so much help. People are so willing to dive in and help you with schoolwork or interviews. So, yeah. And then, you know, it's New York, y'all. Like, you can go out for walks, hang out outside, you know. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, I echo Candace's point about like there were classes like corporate finance and accounting where I bonded with my classmates because none of us knew what was going on. So it was just like we were just bonding over that just to be able to figure out how to do it. So I think, yeah, there was some camaraderie around the struggle in order to like, for classes where it was like, you know, we didn't know what was going on. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, our former dean, Dean Peter Henry, who's now a faculty member at Stern, so you can actually take his class now. He's still with us, but he used to always encourage prospective students to make sure that wherever you go to business school, that you're going to a place where you're going to find your people and find those people that can support you. And that is super important. So thank you all for sharing. So we have a couple of questions around leadership opportunities and just leadership experience. And so someone said, you know, as someone who maybe is not coming from very robust leadership experience where you maybe managed a team of people, what opportunities did you have to develop those leadership skills? And then someone asked in particular, you know, any opportunities to be an inclusive leader? Good questions, good questions. Keep them coming.
Yeah. So I had been like I'd led a couple teams before school, and so maybe won't talk about the newness of it, but what I will say in terms of develop inclusive leadership, when you are in a club and you're leading your peers, everything's volunteer. It's a very different dynamic. You're leading really with more persuasion and leading with from like a different place than, hey, I can just kind of tell you what to do because I'm your boss, and you know, that kind of a thing. And so I think how that has helped me in terms of leading in a in like a majority white institution, and how I'm kind of carrying that over is also thinking about leading with persuasion. How can I get folks who might not be normally super invested in this initiative or this idea to kind of understand from my perspective why this would be helpful? And so I was able to kind of parlay that experience into my job now. I hope that answers part of the question, whoever asked that.
Definitely, definitely. Anyone else?
I would say that as you progress in your career, you eventually get those opportunities to flex those leadership muscles. And I think it also depends on whatever organization you join. So I think one, again, like leaning on your Stern community for those tips, like hacks, like even how do you navigate those conversations with leading more of an inclusive team. But I think as you just progress, you naturally have those mentors and seeking out mentors as well, whether it's from Stern or even at the corporation you're at, in order to have those conversations and just raise your hand when you may not know what to do is what I've done. So I think I've learned or grown a lot more post Stern in terms of leadership capabilities and managing a team and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and so we have a question around how does Stern support students of color? And so maybe thinking to some of your experience, and I think many of you kind of hit on some of these things, but if there's anything else you wanted to add, maybe in terms of clubs or any kind of experiences you had in that regard.
I don't think I have anything new to add on that actually. That, you know, I think we covered it earlier.
So, oh, Janelle?
No, I was going to say the same. Yeah, like between AHBBS and consortium and all the things we've chatted about, I think we've kind of covered it.
Yeah. And I'll say from an admissions perspective, and I would definitely encourage you all to reach out to our current students as well, as they're certainly navigating this virtual semester and all things that come with that. But we have a lot of resources, and Stern's paid particular attention to really thinking about faculty members and how we can ensure that we have more faculty members who look like the student body that we're hoping to build. I know that that's certainly an area that we have a lot of room for improvement in, to be completely candid. But the great thing is seeing, the support coming from our dean and other, leaders around the university. And we are so excited to welcome back Gary Frazier to Stern, who is our Dean of Diversity and Inclusion, and some of our alums here are nodding their heads. He's like the mayor of Stern. He was, I think it was one of the first co-presidents of the Association of Hispanic and Black Business Students way back when. He's part of the consortium, a consortium alum. He ran our careers office for a while, left Stern for a while, and now is back in this role where, it's literally, that's what he's paying attention to, is kind of thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging through every kind of aspect of our program. And he's willing to chat with you as well. So if you want to get in touch with him, he's open to having one-on-one conversations as well. Great, so let's see. Did any of you come, this is a good question that we actually get a good amount, but did any of you come in with, or know of someone who came in with a family or significant other, and how did you, I guess how did that go? What kind of support did you see in that regard? Because I know, our students are certainly coming in and, with families and things like that. And so what was your experience either personally, or what have you seen from your classmates?
Yeah, we actually had a classmate who got pregnant while in business school. And so our second year, she would bring the baby to school, and literally we would just take turns. We would take care of the baby if she needed to go to an interview or take a call. And so she really kind of leaned on our block, which is the kind of larger groups that Stern parses you into. But again, super supportive. I think we had a lot of significant others who would join us for trips or join us for happy hours. I think it's definitely up to you, and obviously, your significant other, how much you want to be involved, but it's not crazy to think that they can be fully involved in the experience. I legit, there was a guy in my block whose girlfriend, I didn't realize, did not go to Stern for a while. I was like, oh, you're not a student. Got it. So I think it's up to you how much you want to kind of involve your significant other.
Yeah, that's great. We also do have some support resources, and there's a club, Stern Partners, that's specifically for significant others and partners of current students. And I think one of the co-presidents of that club every year is actually a non-Stern student partner. So let's see, we'll maybe do 2 more questions. I know the evening, at least on the East Coast here, it's getting a little late, so I'll let you all have some time back. But a question in particular for Candace, as someone who was coming from a writing background, how were you able to kind of adjust to the business school?
Hey, and sorry, we got a census person here trying to do our job, making our voices count. So sorry for the background. Yes, it's very important. Fill your census information. Also, make sure you vote. And sorry, my fiance is trying to stay out of the camera shot. But yeah, so someone from a writing background. So full disclosure, right? I had a very strong liberal arts background and was not intending to go into a career that was investment banking, right? So my advice on how to transition is going to be a little different. I think if I were planning to go into a career that was in banking, sales and trading, or, hedge fund, any of that, I would have needed to prepare during school a little bit differently. But what I can say is, it's going to sound a little bit, I think, of what Janelle advised folks to, and Lamar, which is spend a lot of time with people in your block and people in your network who actually know it. It's not uncommon that you're going to get people who already did investment banking who maybe want to switch out to something else. People who, you know, are accountants already. There's a guy, he used to tutor me, this poor thing. He would, you know, spend hours and hours making up questions for me and like helping to quiz me on accounting, which is why I know the very little that I do know. And so I think spending that time when you're in school, developing your right network, would be advisable. And yeah, and you'll be fine. You will really be fine. Like, it's business school is transitional for so many people. You don't need to worry about it. Did I answer the full question? Sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, perfect.
I think so. And last question for each of you. Briefly, we have a couple of questions about like career support and kind of formal career support. And so if you could just briefly just describe the kind of support you received from the Office of Career Development or career coaches or student clubs as you were making the transition post-business school.
Yeah, I think being consortium really gives you a leg up there. Like way before you start school, NYU starts to prep you for, you know, potential interviews during OP. And so almost immediately you start getting very personalized attention with your resume and, you know, what your career goals are, and the STAR kind of interview format that Lamar mentioned earlier. You learn all of that very quickly, so you have a leg up versus all of the other students who basically don't start working on their resume until August or September when we start school, and you already have like your first draft. So lots of support, especially for consortium. You know, at that point, they're only working with whatever the 30, 40 people who are in consortium. So you get a lot of individualized attention, which can be good or bad, you know. There was definitely a lot of nudging for me. They're like, go talk to this company. And I was like, okay, if I have to. And then besides that, which I think is like an awesome kind of perk of being in the consortium, I think the student clubs also do a great job of really like coordinating and planning visits to companies, connecting you to alumni. There's newsletters that come out like every week that literally list like any opportunity that exists out there, all in one place. So I think it's a pretty robust experience. And like I said, for me, they were able to connect me directly to alums who, you know, literally affected my career. So I think there is a lot of support at NYU, and I think the consortium really helps with that.
Yeah, I think to add to Janelle's point, there was also mock interviews that I know the CDC did. I think some of them were with alumni, so it was like more feedback to better prepare for your interviews depending on whatever sector you've been interviewing, whether it's consulting or marketing, finance, etc. And also the resume critiquing, being able to like submit your resume and have them review it and then optimize whatever or change whatever you need to do. And so those were two things that helped me from the CDC.
And then I guess this is kind of post-graduation, but as an alum, just you have access still to career services. So if folks are thinking about moving careers or just like wanting someone to take another look at your resume, you have access to folks who support you in that. Other than that, I don't have anything to add to what Lamar and Janelle have already expertly said.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. So I just wanted to say thank you to, of course, our alums and spending this evening providing your insight and being authentic, which I think is always super appreciated from our Stern alums. And thank you to all of the attendees, prospective students, applicants, all of that who stayed on And thank you for asking such thoughtful and practical questions. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I kind of left up this slide. You know, definitely stay in touch. At the end of these events, I always say, you know, the conversation shouldn't end here. You know, we're all rooting for you. We all are here to support you. And, you know, reach out, definitely reach out. Feel free to reach out to myself. We have a bunch of other events coming up. Reach out to current students, continue to do your due diligence, and good luck with everything. Make sure you're staying, you know, sound of mind, body, and spirit through all that's going on right now. But definitely reach out and stay engaged with us in any way that you can. So with that, I'm gonna say wrap up and say thank you, everyone. Have an awesome evening, and hopefully we will be in touch very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.